أعوذ بالله الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So in our lesson today we shall be talking about the research paper editing. That is, when you finish writing your research, before you submit it for evaluation, you have to ensure that it meets the standards. So if you want to ensure that your research meets the standard, then you have to thoroughly edit your work. You have to thoroughly edit your research. So our lesson objectives today are: by the end of the lesson, learners should be able to define editing in research. That is, what is editing in research? Number two, understand the importance of editing in research. Number three, identify types of editing in research. Four, outline the steps in the editing process. Five, recognize key areas to focus on during during editing. Then avoid common mistakes during editing. Utilize tools and resources for editing. Then lastly, apply tips for effective editing. So these are what we shall be covering today in our lesson. So Bismillah. So the first thing is ta'rif, the definition of editing in research. So what is the meaning of editing? So editing in research refers to the process of reviewing and refining a research report to ensure four things. Number one, to ensure accuracy, consistency, clarity, and logical flow. It involves correcting errors in grammar, structure, and formatting while improving the overall readability and coherence of the content. So here they're telling us, number one, that editing is a process. Process meaning that it is something that is systematic. It is something that has stages. It is something that has steps. So it is the process of we are reviewing. Reviewing basically means al-muraja. We are reviewing and refining. Refining means what? Refining means to improve on something. So improving a research report to ensure a dikka is what is known as accuracy and consistency. Consistency basically is related to coherence, or consistency means sticking to one style. For example, if your research, you are using the Times Roman size, font size 12 in your research, then there needs to be some consistency from chapter 1 to chapter 5. You have to ensure that you are using size 12. Then lastly, you have to ensure that you have to ensure that there is the logical flow. When you're talking about logical flow, we mean that there should be a tasalsul in your research. So what is the importance of editing in research? Number one, editing enhances the clarity, what we've just said, al-wudu and ad-dikka. It enhances the clarity and readability of the research. If you want people or your audience to easily understand and read your research, then you should be very thorough in your editing. Number two, ensures that the research meets academic and professional standard. Remember, at Lincoln University, we have our academic standard. So while you are editing, you have to edit your project, your thesis, your dissertation to ensure that it meets those academic and professional standards. Number two, it improves the credibility and reliability of the findings. Remember, in chapter 4 and 5, you of course will go to the field to collect some data. After collecting the data, you're going to analyze it. After analyzing it, there is the element of credibility and reliability. So if your research has a lot of errors, if your research was not edited, then it will not be reliable and credible. Then number four, increases the chances of publication or acceptance. So there are some students who might be planning to submit their research to be published in maybe international journals. If you want your research to be published, then you have to be thorough in the editing. Then lastly, demonstrates attention to detail and professionalism. By editing your research, it basically demonstrates that you have the skills of doing what? Of being attentive to both the minor and the major errors in your research. Now, the types of editing in research. So while you're editing, you have to ask yourself, what are you editing? Because all these types of editing are related to what? All these types of editing are very important. And you cannot do all these types of editing at the same time. So you have, for example, to say like, today I'm going to do what? Today I'm going to do a substantive editing, tomorrow a copy. So you have to like have a timetable of how you're going to go about through all these types of editing. So number one, we have the substantive editing, which is also known as the structural editing. Number two, copy editing. Three, content editing. Four, technical editing. Then lastly, we have the proofreading. So let us start with the first one. So what is substantive editing or the structural editing? Number one, this type of editing, it focuses on the overall structure of your thesis, the organization, and the flow of the research. So it focuses on the overall structure. How is the general structure of your report? That is starting from the title page to the end where you have the appendixes. Then it also ensures that research questions, objectives, and hypotheses are clearly defined. So when you're doing a substantive editing, you have to review again your research questions, objectives, and hypotheses. And remember what I said previously, that these three things, they are always related to each other. They are always related to each other. So you have to review these three elements to ensure that there is coherence and there is consistency. Then number three, it also checks for logical progression of ideas and arguments. Remember yesterday, we were talking about literature review. So when you are doing a substantive editing, you have to ensure that there is some logical progression of ideas and arguments. So it basically means there should be no tashattut fi al-ma'lumat. So tashattut basically means there is some element of al-ashwa'iyya. You are just throwing things anyhowly. You are just writing your things anyhowly. Nobody can understand it. Your work is very disorganized. So this type of editing will ensure that at least there is some element of organization, there is some element of progression in your research. Then it also evaluates the coherence and relevance of sections, e.g. the introduction, literature review, methodology, results, discussion, conclusion. So it ensures the coherence and relevance. So when you are talking about coherence and relevance, we are basically asking ourselves the grouping of the elements in your research. That is where the introduction is. Should it be there? Where the literature review is? Should it be there? How relevant is it? Do you need it in your research, or you have to remove it? So this is what this editing answers. Then lastly, suggest improvement in the presentation of data, tables, and figures. Remember, in chapter 4 and 5, it's all about data, tables, and figures. So these types of editing will help you to actually know if there is a need to improve in your data presentation, the arrangement of your tables, the numbering in your figures. So this is a type of editing that is really going to help you. Then number two is the copy editing. So when you're talking about the copy editing, it focuses on grammar. Number one, like the grammar, the grammar that you've used in your research. That is, for example, and when you're talking about the grammar, we are basically talking about the 8 parts of speech, how you've used the 8 parts of speech, the elements of adjective, conjunctions, the verbs, adverbs, the prepositions, ila ghairi dhalik. Also, number 2, it's all about the what? The grammar. When you're talking about grammar, we are talking about the sentence structure and the types of sentences you are using in your research. So, for example, are you using simple sentences? Are you using compound sentences? Are you using complex sentences? Are you using compound complex sentences? So it will really help there. Spelling, this will help you to check to ensure that there is no error, spelling mistakes in your research. The punctuation, the use of commas, the use of periods or the full stop at the end of the sentences, the quotation marks, and basically generally the syntax. Then it also ensures consistency in language and style. And remember, consistency, it's very important. If, for example, you've decided to use simple sentences in your research, then there should be consistency in the use of simple sentences. If you decided that you're going to use compound sentences, it should be consistent. The same thing applies to style. Then number 3, checks for proper use of technical terms and jargons. So technical terms and jargons means the same thing. For example, in your research, if you are using some technical terms, then it will be prudent for you to do what? To explain the meaning of those technical words. If you're using abbreviation, that is why you normally have a table of abbreviation and acronyms, because some people might not know the meaning of those abbreviations or acronyms. So that page is very important in your research. Then it ensures adherence to the required citation style. Remember yesterday we talked about this citation, the citation style. So if you're using APA, as in our case, there should also be consistency. Don't mix the citation styles. So here you also verify the accuracy of references and citation, both the in citation and in the reference list. Then number 3 is the content editing. Now this focuses on the accuracy and the relevance of the content. So this editing now, it's all about the mawdu. It focuses with the content, what you have written in your research. Is it, number 1, is it accurate? Accuracy basically means, like, where did you get this information? What are your sources? Are the sources accurate? Then when you are talking about relevance, we are talking about the importance of the information in your what? The importance of the information in your research. Is it important? Is it up to date? So this content editing will help you answer this question. Number 2, ensures that all claims are supported by evidence, especially in the literature review. For each and every argument you make in your research, then you have to have a what? You have to have evidence. You need to support it. And even in your research problem, for example, in your research problem, you might claim that you are doing a research in a given area because there is problem A, B, C, and D. Can you give us evidence to show that there is a problem? Don't just say there is a problem. So when you're defending your thesis, you will be asked, okay, you're saying there is a problem. What is the evidence? So the evidence, for example, you can say there is the data from the Ministry of Health. For example, in the year 2023, there is a report from the WHO, ila ghayri dhalik. So you need to have some data to support everything you are going to be asked. When the panel needs you to support everything. So if you are asked question with the panelists and you don't have evidence, they'll tell you that you've copied your work. This is not your research. Somebody else wrote this work for you. There is no originality. You're going to score a 0, or they might tell you to repeat everything. So you have to be very careful. Then number 3, checks for logical consistency in arguments. Then lastly, verifies that the research objectives are met and conclusions are well supported. Then number 4, there is the technical editing. So the technical editing focuses on technical aspects of the research. And this is, you'll always find it in chapter 4 or 5. So this is where there are some equations, some formulas, and data presentation. So it basically checks the technicality. So you have to be very careful with the equations that you are using. For example, when it comes to your target population, you have your population and you have your sampling. So to get the sample of your population, there is a formula that you have to use. So you have to ensure that there is accuracy in the use of that formula. Ensures accuracy in statistical analysis. And in your research, of course, you are going to have the regression, the correlational analysis, if sometimes you have graphs, sometimes you have charts. Not all the, sometimes you might not have charts, sometimes you might not have graph. So it does not mean that you need to have all of this. It depends with your research methodology, Then verifies that technical terms are used correctly. So this is the technical editing. Then lastly, there is the proofreading. And this is the final stage of editing. Now, this one, it focuses on minor errors. Like, this is like 2 days before submitting your work, or 1 day before submitting your work, you can proofread again. This is what is normally known as lamasat al-akhira. You check for typos. Maybe sometimes there's some typing errors, formatting inconsistencies, and minor grammatical mistakes. Then also ensures proper alignment. Remember, you always have to ensure that you justify your paragraphs. The font size, you have to ensure there is uniformity. The spacing, in our case, the spacing has to be size 2. The margin as per the guidelines of Lincoln. Also here you have to verify the page numbers and the table of content. So sometimes you realize when students are submitting their thesis, when you go to the table of content, maybe the research objective in the table of content is written page 20, but when you come to page 20, you don't find the research objective, you find the literature review. So you have to ensure that there is some element of consistency. What is in your table of content? If I go to your table of content, if it says page 20, if I come to page 20, I'm going to find it there. If I'm not going to find it there, you lose some marks because it means you did not revise your work. You have to check the headers, the footers, and the table of content. So this is what it's all about, proofreading. Now, on to the next stage, the steps in the editing process. So when you are editing, you edit it. There is what is known as it is a systematic thing. That is what we said in the definition. It is a process that involves these 7 things. So number 1 is the pre-editing preparation. Pre means before. Even before editing, what should you do? You need to familiarize yourself with the research topic and objective, understand the target audience, and the required formatting style. Target audience, you have to know to whom are you writing? Who is going to read your research? Once you know your target audience, then you will exactly know your style, your language, your tone of writing. Then gather all necessary materials before editing. The style guides, the format Lincoln, the Lincoln format, for example, citation manuals, in our case, the APA. So you have to know the APA. How do you, for example, reference the journals, the books, the articles? Articles, for example, there is something from the website. You have to know because their citation is different. An institutional guideline, the university guideline. So, number one, you have to be familiar with all these requirements before you start. Then, number two is the initial review. So, here you read the entire document to get a sense of structure, flow, and overall quality. So, here you just read the entire document quickly. It's basically about scanning. Then, identify major issues. As you scan, try to identify the gaps in logic and clear arguments or missing section. You can highlight or you can underline. Then you go to the structural editing, reorganize section for better flow, ensure each section transitions smoothly to the next, remove redundant or irrelevant content. Sometimes when you are reviewing your work, you will realize that some paragraphs, they're just irrelevant. They're just taking space. They're not even related to the section. So in this case, you just have to delete the necessary parts. Then there is the next thing, the language and style editing, citation and reference checking. Then there is proofreading and the final review. So this is how you do what? This is how you edit, or these are the steps involved in what? In the editing of your work. Now, what are the key areas to focus on during editing? Like, where do you have to focus? So when editing a research document, pay attention to the following key areas. Number one is clarity and precision. Number two, logical flow. Three, consistency. Then there is accuracy. Then there is conciseness. Then there is adherence to guidelines. So when we're talking about number one, clarity, ensure that the research question and objectives are clearly stated. Many students, they submit their work, and when they submit their work, you find that the research questions and the research objectives are not clear. So you have to always ensure these two things are very clear. Then when you're talking about clarity and precision, use precise language to convey ideas. Use simple sentences. Many students, they use complex sentences, or compound sentences. Use simple sentence, subject, verb, object. Avoid jargon or overly complex terms unless necessary. Avoid complex vocabulary. Use easy words. Word choice is very important. Use very easy words. Then number two, the logical flow. Ensure that the arguments and findings are presented in a logical sequence. Tasalsulan. Check that each section builds on the previous one. Always ensure that there is the element of tasalsul, that this argument builds on the former. So that, and one thing that can help you should be using a lot of transition words. Transitional words normally help you when it comes to logical flow, and especially in the literature review, because when you're reviewing a literature, you'll be required to use a lot of transitional words. When you're talking about transitional words, there are words like however, in addition, also, another point, firstly, secondly, lastly, consequently. So these words make your research to be very, very impactful. So you should review our work to see how frequently do you use these transitional words. Then number three, consistency. Maintain consistency in terminology, the words that you are using. If you are using a word terminology in chapter 1, the same thing you should do it in chapter 2, chapter 3, it will be the same term. Abbreviation, there should be consistency in it, and formatting. Ensure the heading and subheading follow a consistent style. For example, if you are chapter 1, if all your chapters are size 18 times Romans, you have to ensure all the chapters are the same size and font. But some students, when they're presenting their work, you find the chapter 1 here is size 14. You go to chapter 2, it is size 13. You go to chapter, so if you've decided the font size is going to be 16 in all the chapters, it has to be the same, but don't mix, don't have a lot of mushakal in your research. The Times Romans, if it is size 12, the content, of course, the content will be size 12. But the heading, sometimes you can decide the heading can be maybe 13, bold. So if you decided that the headings and the subheadings are going to be in bold, then from chapter 1 to chapter 5, it should be in bold. But some students will find some heading in bold, some headings are in italics. So your work needs to be organized. Accuracy, verify the accuracy of data, statistics, and reference. Ensure that all claims are supported by evidence. So the best practice when you're writing your research is every paragraph should have a reference. Every paragraph should have a reference. This is what we normally check when you are evaluating your work. Because if you don't have a reference in this paragraph, it means you copied this work. It means this is ChatGPT. It means that this is just DeepSeek. It's not. So every chapter, always ensure at least it has a reference. Every paragraph has a reference. Every paragraph has a reference. But if you're just writing paragraphs without reference, it means there is no originality in your work. It means you just copied your work. Then conciseness, remove redundant or repetitive content. Redundant means unnecessary. Then there is repetitive. Sometimes there are some repetitive work, repetitive sentences, repetitive elements. Remove it from your research. Avoid wordiness and ensure that each sentence adds value. Avoid having a lot of words in your research. There are some students, they just think if you have a lot of words, it means your research is good. Sometimes there is normally say, khairu kalam ma kalla wa dalla. Khairu kalam ma kalla wa dalla. So the same thing applies to your research. Khairu kalam ma kalla wa dalla. It's summarized, concise, precise, and we can understand it. But some students, they just go here, copy, paste, bring, copy, paste, copy, paste. So you find that you have a lot, like 100 pages, 120 pages in your research. But if we evaluate it, we see that it does a lot of things that doesn't make sense. And another student has a research of 60, 70 pages, but it has content. The work is well organized. Then adherence to guideline, follow the formatting and citation guidelines specified by the institution or journal. Always follow. This is what I normally tell my students, the ones I supervise. I always remind them, follow the format, follow the format. Now, what are the common mistakes to avoid during editing? Number one, overlooking the big picture. Focusing too much on minor errors and neglecting the overall structure and flow. Don't focus a lot with the minor errors. Focus with the big picture, the structure. Then inconsistent formatting. This is what I was saying. Failing to maintain consistent formatting throughout the document. This is the mistake that many students normally do. So please ensure that from the first page to your last page, there is some uniformity. Then number three, ignoring citation errors, overlooking incorrect or missing citation. Some students, they have a lot of citation errors in their research. Some of them, they just do it deliberately. Wow, they think that, no, they will not read. They are very busy. So they just ignore writing some citation because they think the evaluator, they don't have time to check, to cross-check. Rushing the process, not allocating enough time for thorough editing. Editing needs like a week, but you cannot just like do, because we've said there are different types of editing. You cannot do it in one day. Then over editing, making unnecessary changes that disrupt the author's voice or intent. Also remember, while editing is good, over editing is also not good. So if you over edit, then your author's voice, your originality will not be there. Because remember, what we need to see in your research is your originality. Now, what are the tools and resources for editing? There are a lot of tools in the internet, and there are a lot of softwares that can help you in editing. We have grammar and spell checkers, Grammarly, Pro Writing Aids, Hemingway Editor. Some of these instruments are free, but some of them you need to pay. So you just put your research, for example, Grammarly, copy paste chapter 1. It will bring all the errors, the grammar errors, and it will suggest what you have to do. Wow, that's very good. We have the reference management tools. We have the EndNote, Zotero, Mendeley. It helps you in referencing. So you just put your document, copy paste the whole document, and you just instruct it, hey, I need the APS style in this document. So it's going to do everything. So technology has made everything to be very easy, so you don't have to struggle. Plagiarism checkers. Once you finish writing your research, in some universities, you have to present a turn it in report. So this turn it report, many universities, they normally do it. So you cannot defend your thesis without the turn it in report. So you pass, it's a software. So this software will give you a percentage. So many university, if the turn it percentage is 20, it means that your work is original. But if your turn it report is more than 30, it means there is no originality in your work. So if you want to know if your work is original, you can ask somebody to generate this report for you, the turn it report. So before you present your work, it's just, you have somebody, you just give it to somebody, they do it for you. If you get a percentage that is 20 and below, it means your work is original. But the higher the percentage, it means there is no originality in your work. Then the style guides, you can look for the style guides that can help you. Then there are many writing and editing software that can help you. Then these are some of the tips for effective editing. Take breaks. Step away from the document for a while to return with a fresh perspective. So you don't have to do it at one time. No, today 30 minutes, khalas, tomorrow again. Read aloud. Reading the text aloud can help identify awkward phrasing. So read it like you're reading the Quran. Read it aloud. You'll realize, you'll find the errors. Use checklists. Have a checklist with you. Have a book, a table with you. That helps you. Seek feedback from your friends, mentors. Edit multiple times. So that's the end of our lesson. Is there any question as I take the attendance? Ali Salat, you can also help me to take the attendance. So we finish, we still have 2 more lessons. So on Tuesday, we'll finish our lesson on Wednesday. So next Wednesday, we shall be finishing our course, inshallah. Next Wednesday, we shall be finishing our course. So in our next lesson, I'll explain to you more about your midword, your assignment. You will be having a quiz. The quiz will be from chapter 1 to chapter 4. Then your final exam will be from chapter 5 to 8. So 4 in your quiz, 4 chapters. Then you'll have the other 4 in your final exam. So by next week, you should be having your quiz. Maybe you will have your quiz maybe next week, Thursday or Friday. Your quiz should be ready by then. So you should be preparing for it. Is there any question, please? Is there any question?
How many chapters teaching?
The quiz will be chapter 1 to 4.
Quiz.
Yeah.
1 and 2.
1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Finally.
That will be the quiz.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
Then your
Finally.
final will be 5, 6. Will be 8, 7, 6, and 5.
8, 7, 6, and
The
5.
last 4.
Okay.
Any other question, please? So, inshallah, let us meet on Tuesday, inshallah. Assalam.